Hi, welcome to the Unity booth. Thank you for being here. Let's begin with the presentation. We're going to talk about Project Tiny and how to build tiny experiences with this new Unity runtime. First, I'd like to ask you who's here because is interested in Project Tiny. Raise your hands. Okay, some people, cool. Who's here because you're too tired and just wanted to sit and see what's going on? Okay, thank you. That's fine. So my name is Arturo. I'm an evangelist for games at Unity. So if you ever have any question about Unity, if you're working on something, please feel free to reach out to me via Twitter or via email. I'll give you my email in a second. But today we're going to talk about this new thing that has me super excited because I believe that Project Tiny is going to make a huge difference in the way we make games as Unity developers. Okay, so what is Project Tiny? Tiny is a new Unity runtime and editor mode that is designed for you to build experiences that are small and that can run without you or your users to install anything in their devices or in their computers or anything. Let me show you a quick example of this. This is my cell phone. I apologize if someone sends me a weird message. I'm sorry. So if you have your phone activated, you will be able to scan this code. Otherwise, you can see my phone on the... Oh, you cannot see anything? Sorry. There we go. Sorry. So, by the way, I cleared the cache of my phone, so whatever you see here is now going through 3G or whatever. So I point towards the icon. I open the link. It's taking some time. Sorry about that. Please don't download Unity here. So, yeah, I'm already playing the game. Is the game running on my mobile device? I have a full game. It's not just like a simple one-screen game. It's a complete game. It's a match 3. If you're curious about how this was made, the entire project, you can go visit the Tiny station on the other side of the booth. And this game is already in my phone. I can simply play it. I didn't need to install anything, and it's a full game. Right now, we're just supporting 2D, but the future is looking promising. Let me close this thing. Okay, let's continue with the presentation. So a quick overview. Right now, Tiny is a preview package. It's being delivered via the package manager. Have you used the Unity package manager? Raise your hands. Yeah, some of you. Perfect. So it's not integrated into the Unity editor. So if you're not using it, then you won't pay the price of having that in the editor. The target right now is if you're making games or applications that are between 100 kilobytes and 5 megabytes in size, then Project Tiny is your way to go. If you've used Unity and if you want to have a game that is a spinning cube, probably for iOS, it's going to be like 20 megabytes just for that. So the Tiny use case is when you don't want to pay that price for small applications. Right now, as we're in preview, we are supporting TypeScript, the TypeScript language. However, once we hit 1.0 of the package, we're going to move to C#. So the C# you already know in Unity is going to be the same C# that you use for Project Tiny. You don't have to learn anything new. If you want to play around with the preview, then you will have to play with TypeScript. As of today, we cover HTML delivery, only 2D. So if you want to make 2D games or instant ads, the playable ads, you have to make them 2D. But there's a plan to support 3D in the near future. If you already know Unity, if you are familiar with the editor workflows, then you have a long path covered already because you don't have to learn a new tool or anything new. It's highly modular, so you just pay the price of performance and delivery of the things that you will be using, okay? And this is achieved because of the modular architecture of the modules, and we will see what that means in a second, but also at runtime because we are using this ECS approach. Who's familiar with ECS? Who knows what ECS? Okay, cool. Who doesn't have any idea of what ECS stands for? And that's totally fine. Okay, perfect. So for those of you who are new to ECS, I have to give an overview because Tiny relies on ECS. So unlike the regular Unity where you use mono behaviors and this object-oriented programming, Tiny relies on ECS. So imagine we're writing code based on data and not based on other things. So we imagine our code as if everything was just data, okay? And this will make sense in a couple of seconds. So we have entities, and these entities are just indices. So imagine we were making a drone game. We will just have like variables that tells us, okay, I have a drone 1, a drone 2, and drones, but they don't contain any data and they don't do anything. They are just indices that tells us, okay, this is going to be a drone, or this is pointing to a drone, but doesn't do anything. That's the entity part. We also have the components. The components are just data. They are collections of data. In this case, we can have like the speed, which could be like a vector 3. We could have a position. We could have a mesh. We could have a material. All these components are going to hold just data. This data doesn't render my drone. This data is not going to move my drone. It's just defining how a drone is assembled, but cannot do anything. For that, we need the third part of the ECS world, which is the system. The system is the part that transforms that data. Okay, so if I want to render my drones, I will need to access the position component, I will have to access the material component, etc. And I will have one system called render system that renders that system. If I want to move my drone, then that system will access the position, the speed, any other relevant component to move that drone. Okay, so these systems are tied to one functionality, and they just operate on the data. These systems don't contain any data. Okay, this is a basic overview of what ECS is. So a few concepts. When you create a new Tiny project, you will see some new icons in the editor. You will see some new stuff. So this is the collection as of today. The basic things are that we have entities, we have components, we have TypeScript files, which can be systems, but you can also use TypeScript files to define like static or services or other things. So that's why I didn't call that system. We have entity groups. When you want to group together a set of entities, then you can use an entity group, which is an entity itself. We have enumerators, we have structs, we have modules. Some modules are built into what we have in the package right now. Some of them can be written by you, so that's that. And we also have projects, tiny projects, how we call them. So this is a list of modules that we have working right now. So if you want to have like audio or video playing, you want to have sprite animations, you want to have like physics 2D, if you want to have math and other type of things, then those things are already there on the preview package. And the core is just 52 kilobytes. Now, a concept that I think it's important for you to know is the concept of these fences. Basically, you can tell your system when to execute. If you have a special use cases, for instance, you can say, okay, execute this system before the user code starts. So this is a way to handle the flow of when your systems are going to be executed. How to install the Tiny package is super simple. You first need to create a new Unity project. A regular Unity project, you don't have to create anything new. You don't have to download a different editor or anything. It's just a regular Unity project that we have. Oh, sorry. There we go. Well, after that, this is a video. This is not me playing the editor super quick and talking and not moving. This is just a video. You have to go to the package manager and import the Tiny mode package. It's in preview, so you need to select the preview version of the packages. You will see it here in the list. There's this Tiny mode package. You install it, and then after the installation finishes, this is also a fast-forwarded version of the video, so it's not that fast, but just for the sake of time. After this, you have the package already there. The same way other packages work. I have my tiny mode package. I'm ready to go. If you don't want to start from scratch, then you can import the samples. The samples are complete small projects that you can use to experiment and learn from without having to start a project from scratch. We have a lot of samples. One of them is the match 3 game, the one that I was showing with the dinosaur, the one they are showing over there. We also have like a Flappy Bird clone. So simple games that you can start seeing how they were made. For today's presentation, we're going to make a smaller version of that game. It's just a simple game where we have this dinosaur and the helicopter is trying to get to the egg, and that's pretty much all that we will be covering today. So if I go to Tiny and then new project, I will create a new Tiny project. This is important to know that inside a regular Unity project, we can have multiple Tiny projects, okay? So this is how this works. So you can have, and the importance of this is that you can share assets between the different Tiny projects that you have. Even if you have a game, a complete game, and you want to create a playable ad for that game to put as an ad on another application, then you can reuse the assets for the big game between the big game and the Tiny game. So I'm going to create a new project here called Tiny Dinosaur. Unity is going to basically create some folders for me, and it's going to create this configuration file. You can see there that I have some modules selected, and some of them are unselected. The ones that are unselected are not going to be exported with my Tiny package. So I'm sure, and I have control over what I want to export and what I don't want. If my game is not using any physics, then there's no point in paying the price for a physics engine, right? So we simply uncheck it, and we can work on that. You can activate and deactivate them almost as you wish. But there are certain modules that depend on other modules, so you need to be mindful about that, because you might be using one module that depends on the sprite module, so you will be using that module whether you like it or no. Okay, so let's continue. You see I have the components, the entities, and the scripts folder. I'm renaming this entity group to Game Bootstrap. So here is my Game Bootstrap entity group. Think of these as if they were Unity scenes. However, these are not Unity scenes. These are entity groups. Now, the way I will be instantiating and destroying or loading and unloading these assets are via entity groups, okay? So this entity group just have one camera entity. I'm not going to call them game objects anymore. These are not game objects. So let's get used to the entity name. So I just have this camera. I go to the inspector, and you can see that the inspector looks exactly the same as if I were using game objects. However, these are entities. So let's see that we have a transform, and we have the camera component. I'm going to create a new entity here, and let's see. And I have a question for you, for those Unity users. If I create a new game object, and I go to the inspector, what do I see there? A transform, right? I see a position, a rotation, and a scale. Even if I'm just using that game object just as a placeholder or to make my hierarchy look better, I'm paying the price for these three vectors, and I won't be using them. Entities, remember, they don't have anything. They don't contain anything. If I just want to have one entity, an empty entity, then I don't have to pay the price for anything. So in this case, my entity doesn't have any components. If I want my entity to move, then I can add the position component. If I want my entity to rotate, I can add the rotation component. And this is basically how we assemble our entities, which makes a lot of sense. We also have entity families, but we will see that in a second. So I'm going to destroy the entity, and I'm going to create another entity but this time using a sprite as the similar workflow of Unity. So I just drag and drop my sprite from the project folder to my entity group, so it becomes an entity with some extra components. The important part here is that when I select my sprite, when I select my texture, it's been already imported into my project. So I can use this texture or this sprite in another tiny project or in a regular Unity project. The sprite is already there, and it contains the same import settings that I have across them. So if you have used Unity on large projects and you have to switch from one platform to the other, then you don't have to do that here because you are already using the same imported assets over here. So I drag and drop my dinosaur sprite to the hierarchy. I'm just changing the half vertical size of the camera just so I can have the dinosaur there. And we can see that our dinosaur contains some components out there. I was trying here to rename my dinosaur. There, success. You see here that as soon as I drag and drop this sprite into the hierarchy, I got some components. I could remove the individual components. So if I know I'm not going to scale the dinosaur, I can remove that component. But I also got a sprite renderer component. Now, if you imagine for a second, how does this look inside? This is just data. I just have data for the sprite reference, the color, the type of blending, etc. But this component is not necessarily doing anything, right? There's a system that is looking for all the sprite renderer components and is rendering that sprite. But in particular, this component is not doing anything, unlike the regular Unity or the Unity, where some components also contain code that do something. In this case, they are not working that way. Okay, I have these component families. So you can see here that there's no transform components. There are different components, and I just group them in families. Okay, I have a question. So the exercise here is I want to move this dinosaur from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. So remember the ECS slides? We need some things for this to happen, right? We need an entity. So I already have my dinosaur entity. We're good. We need another thing, which is a component, right? We need a way to hold data. And the data here that I need is, okay, I need the speed, the rate at which the dinosaur is moving, also the position, etc., but the position is already there. And that's what I'm going to add here. So I'm going to create a new component called movement. So this is a special type of asset. It doesn't have anything. I know it's a component because I have this icon over there, the puzzle piece icon. So I know it's a component. You notice that this component doesn't have anything in particular, right? I don't have any values besides the documentation and unlisted and hide flags options. But I need to define something called fields to actually tell my component, okay, this is the data that you will be holding. So for that, I can simply click the Add Field button, and I'm going to create a speed field, which is a float 32. You could have integers, you can have more complex data, and I can assign a default value. So this default value is going to be 20. And I'm going to drag and drop my component to the dinosaur entity. Okay, perfect. So I have my entities and my components. If I click play, what should we expect to happen? Should the dinosaur move? Raise your hands. Who thinks the dinosaur should move? Okay, I'm not going to be the only one with the hand up. Okay, let's see. I'm going to play, and let's see what happens. For starters, the dinosaur doesn't move. That's good. The dinosaur looks crappy there. And the other thing is that we launched, or Unity launched, a web browser. Right now, I'm exporting this for web. So Unity opens a web browser. Unity starts a small server, so we can serve this page or this content in my computer. So that's that. let's fix a couple of issues here. I go back to the editor. Come on, video of Unity. I go back to the editor, and I can modify some settings by going to settings there, and you can see that I have the default texture format as JPEG, so that's why the compression looks weird. So the thing that I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to select source. So whatever the compression format I have there is going to be the one I export to, because here we're exporting the project. That's how it works. Okay, so back now. Should the dinosaur move? No, right? It's not moving, but it's not looking like crap anymore. Okay, so going back to the editor, what do we need to move our dinosaur? What part of ECS do we need? Systems, right? We need a system that moves our dinosaur. And that's the next thing that I'm going to do here. So I go to the project, Tiny, and I create a new, sorry. I go to Tiny and create a new TypeScript system, but you can also create new TypeScript behaviors. If you love mono behaviors and you cannot live without mono behaviors, and you want to marry a mono behavior, then you can still use something similar to mono behaviors. The recommendation is to use TypeScript systems because you won't paying a small overhead price, but still, if you're having a bad time learning ECS, then it's totally fine. So I'm going to create a new TypeScript system, and this is how one system, an empty system, looks like. So this is the TypeScript syntax. Not very different from C#, but don't worry, we will be using C#, so it's perfectly fine. So let's start writing some code. One thing is that I need to create an iterator. In this case, it's going to be a for each. And this for each is going to execute the code inside the for each for every entity that matches a query. Which query? Well, in this case, I want to modify all the entities in my game that contain a position and contain a movement component. So the system is going to do a search for all those entities, and it's going to execute a certain code. This is just the syntax, so don't worry about it. The C# version looks similar to this, but it's nothing complex. Here I'm just doing a regular lazy movement, nothing impressive, and I'm just assigning the value back again. So this system, the important thing to understand here is that the system is going to be executed over all the entities that match the query that I have after the for each, which basically is an object, an entity that contains a local position and a movement component, okay? In the regular Unity way, it works the other way. So it executes on every game object that I have. So the update executes for each game object. In this case, we just execute the update once, and we iterate over the entire entities that match that. Okay, so back to Unity. I click play. Should this work? Who says this should work? Raise your hands. Someone says kind of works, so it's probably going to move and then stop. I don't know what that means, but yeah, it's moving. Okay, so it's moving. It works. I didn't assign the system to any game to any entity. So this is magic. It's not magic. The system, as soon as it finds a query, it's going to execute over the list of entities that match the query. So we don't need to assign the systems to any of our entities in the game. If there's no match, if there's no match for that, the system will do nothing. So we don't have to worry about that at all. Now, before wrapping up, if I want to create, let's say, another entity, in this case, this entity could be a helicopter, and I want the helicopter to move to the other side, I simply need to assign the component to the helicopter. I change the value of the speed, so it's going to move to the other side. And that's it. My system now matches another entity, and it's going to do the exact thing as we were expecting. So that's in a nutshell how this works. We have, if you go to the booth there to talk to the Tiny developers, we have more examples. They can show you how this works. We have lots of things going on here. I will just show you like the complete game and how it looks and demonstrate that this actually works. So it works. This is not a lie. Another cool thing that we have here is something called play mode. Basically, right now this is not available in my editor, so I cannot see the entities or anything. You could pause the game. Unity is going to load the state of your client, and you will be able to see the game here. You cannot make modifications yet, but maybe it can help you to see for debugging purposes, etc. So this is working. Back to the presentation. There you go. If you want to have a small list of small recipes of how to do something with Tiny, you can go to the first link. We will be having like, how do I scale an object? How do I do this? How do I communicate with the DOM of a web page with Tiny? So those kind of small things, small snippets are going to be there. You can go to the landing page for Tiny, and you can go to the forums. This is evolving. This is a preview. So please be patient, but I am super excited about this project. We're working on the 3D version, so imagine having these small 3D games that load instantly, so I'm super excited. Finally, thank you very much. If you have any question, I'll be here. Please go to the Project Tiny station. We have the developers there, so they can answer all your questions. And I'm not sure if we have time for questions. No, we don't. So I'll be here for the next hour or so we can talk. Thank you very much.